Hey YouTube, this is Happy Coder, and today this video is going to be a book review of the book Make Bootstrapper's Guide, written by the author Pieter Levels. And before we delve into the content of the book, just the TLDR version of the book review. If you're not sure if you want to read the book, I would suggest you to watch the Lex Fridman's interview with Pieter Levels, and the reason being that the interview is going to consume you way less time than actually reading the book from cover to cover. And the interview covers a lot of grounds of the book's content, and it also serves as a great sneak peek for the book. And after watching the interview, if you still wanted to read the book then, by all means, feel free, grab a copy of it. And the third point is, the interview covers a lot of Pieter Levels' AI ventures, such as his experience of tweaking the Stable Diffusion model to make an AI photographer, which does away people's need to hire human photographers. This kind of AI ventures of his, I think, is very relevant to the general tech trend we're seeing today, which is not really discussed by the book. So for that reason, I suggest you to watch the Lex Fridman interview first. And the very quick bird's eye overview of the book is that this book covers the major life cycles of bootstrapping a startup, which just means building your own software as a service or your own startup all by yourself. You're the entrepreneur and the solo developer. And the different life cycles include the ideation stage, building, launching, growing, monetization, automating, and finally exiting, which just means that you're selling your product, you're selling your company to somebody else. And some words about my motivation, why I decided to pick up this book. First of all, the author has a proven credential. He has a verifiable track record. He's built a plethora of different successful startups, including Nomad List, Remote OK, and in total, he's collecting around $200,000 in monthly recurring revenue with a very high profit margin. The profit margin is around 90%. This means that after he's paid off his hosting fees, any software licenses, basically any overhead, he backs 90% of this $200,000 himself. And the second point is, if you're into technology in general, we all know the angst, the confusion, all the discussions about what the AI coding tools is going to mean for software engineers and software developers. Is this profession that we hold very dear to us even going to exist in a few years? And I think this book does a tremendous job romanticizing the lifestyle, the appeal of working as a solo developer / entrepreneur and leveraging your development abilities. And with the advent of AI coding tools, leveraging AI coding tools so that you're building your own startups, your own software companies, so that you can achieve financial independence. And motivated by this book, I decided to work on my first software as a service, which is wordforge.tech. I've already created a video talking about this, which I'll link in the description down below. Essentially, WordForge is a vocabulary learning app that leverages generative AI to give user immediate and contextual feedback to validate their sentences. And we also use spaced repetition algorithms to calculate when's the best time to alert the user to study the word again to achieve maximum result. And as a continuation of our discussion around motivation, why I decided to pick up this book, I appreciate that the book doesn't hold back any punches. The book gives you a brutal truth, gives you a brutal reality check. And the author is saying that you might need to create 10 to 30 apps over the course of 1 to 3 years before you can make any substantial money. I appreciate the honesty of this advice. Another TLDR, my biggest takeaway after reading this book is that if you really want to embrace this solo developer / entrepreneur lifestyle, you really need to be building your projects in public. So the first stage of the life cycle of building your own startup is the ideation stage. Where do you get your ideas from? And the author is suggesting that you should be looking at your own life, focus on your own problems, and turn them into your software ideas. And I found this to be very appealing because it serves as a great motivator. First of all, like the author said, you are the expert at your own problems. Nobody is going to know about the pain points of your problems more intimately than you. And second of all, nobody wants to work on somebody else's product. I've been working at startups and consultancy firms. We all know the feeling of being burnt out. Essentially, it's just a feeling of apathy. After you've been working on a product for years, if you don't own any stake in the product, if it's not something that addresses your personal problem, then over time you just really don't care about this product. Whereas if we look at this photo of the author, Pieter Levels, you can just see the childlike glee in his eyes. His eyes is being glued to the screen, and his brain is producing dopamine because he's working on something that he personally cares about. He's working on something that addresses his own problems. And the author is also suggesting that you should validate your business idea with MVP, with a minimum viable product. So going back to my WordForge project, the version 1, the first version was a very crude prototype, which essentially just has the core feature, meaning that you can submit a sentence with a new word you're trying to learn, and the generative AI is going to spit back a response telling you if your sentence is valid and what's the contextual feedback. What does the AI think of your sentence? And with that working prototype, I talked to quite a few people to gather their opinion, their ideas. It was only after that they have responded to me that, okay, we think this is a tool that can add value to language learners. Then I started to work on refining the user interface and making the user experience painless after I've kind of validated my business ideas with some initial testers. And the third point is kind of abstract, but nonetheless, I think it's very insightful. The author is saying that to have more original problems, you need to be a more original person. Essentially, the author is saying that if you're just sitting at home playing video game, not interacting with anybody, not really doing anything, then it is very difficult for you to come up with any original niche software ideas. So the suggestion is that you need to go out and live your life. You need to go out and explore and interact with more people. And naturally, once you started to enrich your own life experience, you're naturally going to see problems, pain points, and these are all going to be viable business ideas for your SaaS solutions. And the second stage of your bootstrapped startup lifecycle is the building process. And in this chapter, the author is saying that you should be building and shipping as fast as possible, as soon as possible. And you need, when you're building your product, you need to be building fast and minimal. And this point essentially means that you shouldn't be wasting any time trying to learn new technology. You should try to stick with whatever you know and leverage your existing knowledge to build your product. And as an example, when I was building my WordForge app, I got quite a lot of feedback from Reddit. My users were saying that they would appreciate to see an Android version of the app in the Android App Store. And at that time, I didn't have much experience building native Android apps. So I was faced with two different options. I could either buckle down and learn Dart and Flutter and try to build a brand new Android version of the WordForge app, or because I already have this existing Angular web app, I could leverage the Ionic framework and the capacitor library to convert the Angular app into a WebView mobile app, which is fully functional and gets the job done. And that's what I did. And the whole process took me around a week, and the users were happy. And the third point is that we should be gathering user feedback to inform us which direction to take during the building process. An anecdote which I found to be very interesting was one of the author's most prominent startups called Nomad List. The author was able to wait out 5 big competitors who were all backed by multi-million-dollar venture capitalist funding. He was able to do that because of the incredible speed at which he was building and shipping features or fixing bugs. And he used this analogy. Let's consider that the two enterprises, one multi-million-dollar backed, venture capitalist backed startup and himself. These two enterprises are all trying to fix a bug or trying to implement a feature. The startup would be having meetings, delegating tasks, or assigning story points to decide who's going to work on what. And while they were doing all this bureaucratic work, the author because it's by himself, he was able to wake up, grab a cup of coffee, look at the bug report ticket, and just get it fixed and shipped all within half a day. So again, the author is saying that it would be very difficult for the traditional startups to try to compete with bootstrap startups because of our lightning fast building and shipping speed. And the third stage of your bootstrapped startup is the launching stage, which is the stage that the author deems to be the most important. And the author is saying that you should be launching quickly and you need to keep relaunching every few months after you've got a set of new features ready to show your users. Some of the pre-launch tasks that I found to be very important is that before you launch your product to the public, you should already have implemented some sort of email collection mechanism so that you can build a mailing list from which you can directly contact your users to let them know of the new features or other important news. You should also have implemented some push notification mechanisms so that you can reel your users back in after they have become inactive. Analytics is also very important. And these days, with tools such as Google Analytics, implementing some sort of data gathering mechanism has become quite trivial. It's very easy to do. And the fourth, which we have already talked about in the building stage, is that we need to implement some sort of mechanism to gather user feedback. And the way that I have implemented was very simple. Essentially, I just used Typeform. As you can see on the right hand side of the device, I just have this feedback tooltip so that the user can click on it to either file a bug or request a feature or just give some general feedback. And where to launch? This point is also pretty important. The author advocated for a couple of different websites such as Product Hunt, Hacker News, and BetaList. And personally, I found a lot of success launching my product on Reddit. I was able to get a lot of views from some high-valued posts on relevant subreddits. For example, my app idea is to help users to learn vocabulary more effortlessly. So I advertised for my product in subreddits such as r/vocabulary, and I was able to get a lot of views. One point that you need to pay attention to is that you really need to read the rules of the subreddit, because some of the subreddits, they don't allow either AI related content or they don't allow you to promote your own product. Essentially, just make sure you read through the rules so that your post doesn't get eliminated by the moderators. And the next stage of the life cycle is the growing stage. For this stage, the author is very adamant on not hiring growth hackers, also not paying for any paid advertisement, because in his mind, growth needs to be happening organically and naturally. Essentially, he was saying that if you paid for people to try out your products, it's very unlikely that they'll be staying. Instead, in order for your product to grow organically, he was suggesting you to make the features, make your product more easily shareable. So for example, if we use WordForge as an instance, one thing that comes to mind is that each time the user creates a successful complex sentence using a new word he's trying to learn, I could implement some shareable buttons that allows the user to share this sentence on his social media so that his friends could click on the same button, go to my product, and try to create their own sentence using the same word. And essentially, this is how we can foster natural organic growth of our products on social media. And the third point, which like I said is my biggest takeaway, is that you really should be building in public with your users. This point is in alignment with what Naval Ravikant said about compound interest. Naval Ravikant is someone whom I consider to be one of the wisest person of our time, and he once said, all the returns in life, whether in wealth, relationships, or knowledge, come from compound interest. And within the context of your bootstrap startup, we already know that the author said that you might have need to create 10 to 30 apps over the course of 1 to 3 years in order for you to see any substantial money. We already know that. During the course of you creating all these apps, let's say that hypothetically the worst case scenario, like your apps keep failing. If you do not keep a record of your making process on the side, then essentially you're just creating sandcastles on the beach over and over again. Each time after you created another castle, the wave comes along, knocks over your sandcastle. You ended up with nothing. And you just do the same thing over and over again. However, if you do build in public, if you do keep a record of you making your app, and the same scenario happens, your apps just keep failing one after another. But guess what? Because you have been documenting your journey, now you have a track record of your entrepreneurship, so that people who appreciate your entrepreneurship, people who appreciate your work ethic, is going to follow your process because of you instead of your product. So over time, unintentionally, you're growing your personal brand, so that worst case scenario, all of your apps fails, but you'll be able to accrue a significant number of very loyal followings who stayed just for you. So that's my biggest takeaway from reading this book. The last stage of the life cycle that I want to go over is the monetization stage. And the author is saying that you shouldn't be afraid to ask your users for money. And this is the biggest takeaway that I got from this chapter, because growing up, I was raised by immigrant parents, and to them, talking about money is something that is being frowned upon. If you render a good service, it's not very virtuous of you to be asking for money, essentially. But the author is saying that you need to be building your products with monetization in mind, because money is a form of validation. If your users are unwilling to pay for your service, then perhaps your service shouldn't exist in the first place. And that people are willing to pay for products that improve their lives. And to bolster that point, we have some very interesting mathematics here. So out of 1,000 active users, the author is saying that you should expect only 5% of them are willing to pay. Which means that if your goal is to reach 1K paid active users, which is typically the metric that indicates that this product is successful, in that case, you need to divide 1K by 5%, which gives you 20K free users. And that if making money is the goal of you building this product and you fail to reach this number, then at that point you need to shut it down. You need to let it fail fast so you can swiftly move on to the next business ideas and not waste any more time on this dying product. Some business models, some interesting revenue streams that the author discussed in the book: limit features and pay per feature. I think these 2 points are very self-evident. Relevant ads. The author is adamantly against just bombarding your users with irrelevant Google ads. Instead, the author is saying that your advertisement should be somehow related to the service you're rendering your users. So for example, once again, with WordForge, because my service, the service that I'm rendering my user, is trying to help them learn vocabulary more effectively. So along the same line of logic, the advertisements that I should be considering should be something such as maybe foreign language exchange, or maybe freelance one-on-one language acquisition classes. So these ads, because they are in alignment with the service that I'm rendering, they are going to have a much higher conversion rate. And sponsorship, I think we all know what it is. Once your website hits a certain threshold, your website is going to attract attention from bigger brands who are going to be willing to work with you. Patronage, something very interesting. For example, this website, Deku Deals, that I use to track the discount and the price fluctuations of the video games that I'm interested in buying, they have chosen to adopt this revenue stream. They opened up a Patreon page, and as you can see, currently they have around 300 paid members, and they're collecting around $500 in revenue per month. And SaaS business model, again, we all know what it is. It's the monthly subscription model. It's the bread and butter of all startup founders. And the last one that I found very interesting is the community revenue model, which I never really thought about. But I think one example that I can come up with is the Local Live YouTube channel or YouTube community. If you don't know what it is, essentially this guy, Keemstar, He gathered a whole bunch of internet locals, including Boogie 2988 and Wings of Redemption, and they started this show where how they make money is that they only do live shows, and all of their revenue comes from memberships, which is essentially fans of the show give them monthly contributions. Another source would be during their live shows, people can donate to have text-to-speech to interrupt their shows. And to my surprise, I learned from their subreddit that during January this year, January 2025, their revenue from this local network was around 160K, which is quite impressive. So the community revenue stream, the community business model is essentially you don't really charge for your product, but instead you create Discord, you create some sort of group chat or whatever so that people can join to meet like-minded people, and you charge an entrance fee for the community. Again, this is something that I never really thought about, and I thought it was very interesting that the book brought it up. And in conclusion, I found this book to be very interesting. It really romanticized the lifestyle and the whole mentality of building your own startups all by yourself and becoming financially independent from your own creations. I found the idea to be very appealing. So if you're also someone who has some development skills, who is tired of working on other people's products, you might be interested in picking up this book. It's a great read. Is it worth the around $30 USD asking price? Maybe not. I don't think so. I think this book would be more fairly priced around $7 or $10, but feel free to judge it for yourself. Again, I would recommend you to look at the Lex Fridman interview with the author first. So that sums up today's video. I hope you found it to be informative. In the future, I'll be doing more book reviews like this, and I'll see all of you in the next video. Bye bye.